All right, welcome. Today we're going to dive into a really fascinating paper that gives us a powerful new tool to understand how complex systems really work. And I mean everything, from the neurons firing in your brain to the dynamics of a championship-winning team.
So let's start with a really simple question. Think about a team. Is their success just because they have a few star duos? Player A and B are great together, B and C have a good connection, and A and C work well too. Or is there something else going on? A kind of special magic, a genuine three-way synergy that only happens when all three of them are on the field together. That's the core mystery we're going to try and solve.
But, to answer a question like that, we can't just eyeball it. We need a way to actually measure this stuff, to measure cooperation reliably. And to do that, we're going to borrow some really powerful ideas from a field called information theory.
Okay, so first things first, we need to get a handle on two core concepts. These are going to be the building blocks for, well, everything else we talk about. They're what let us actually put a number on things like relationships and uncertainty.
First up is a concept called entropy. And yeah, I know, the name sounds kind of intimidating, but don't let it fool you. For what we're doing today, you can just think of entropy as a measure of surprise or uncertainty. So, a coin flip, heads or tails, that has a little bit of entropy. But a system with a million different possible outcomes, whoa, that has way, way more. It's basically a measure of how much information is potentially packed into something.
All right, next up, mutual information. Now this is where it starts to get really cool. If entropy is about uncertainty, mutual information measures how much that uncertainty goes down when you learn something new. Let's go back to our team. Imagine player A and player B always make the same move. Well, the second you see what player A does, you know exactly what player B is going to do. Your uncertainty about B just dropped to 0. That's because they have high mutual information. They share it. So here's the key takeaway, the really crucial point. When two things are totally independent, the total uncertainty is just, you add them up, A's uncertainty plus B's uncertainty. Simple. But when they're correlated, when they share information, the total uncertainty of the pair is less than the sum of its parts. That overlap, that shared info, makes the whole system more predictable than you'd otherwise expect. Okay, so armed with these ideas, scientists did the logical thing. They tried to extend them to find that elusive three-way synergy we were talking about. They came up with a metric, we'll call it I3, that was supposed to isolate the information shared only by a group of 3. Seemed like a great idea, but, well, it didn't exactly work out as planned. When they applied this I3 thing to some really simple logic systems, the results were just bizarre. I mean, for things like AND gates and OR gates, which are fundamentally built on pairs, the number came out negative. What does that even mean? And for another system, an XOR gate, it was even more negative. It didn't make any sense.
So this old tool basically had two huge problems. First, you get these confusing negative numbers. Now, people thought, okay, maybe negative means synergy, like two things together tell you more about a third than they do on their own. But why a negative number? It's just a really clunky and unintuitive way to think about it. And the second problem was even worse. It would pop up with a non-zero number for systems that were built only from pairs. It was literally seeing ghosts in the machine, finding three-way interactions where none existed. So all this confusion and these weird results, it actually led researchers to a really brilliant new idea. And that's what this paper is all about. It's called connected information. And it's based on a principle called maximum entropy, which is really just a fancy way of saying you make the most honest, most random guess you can based on the facts you have. The core idea is to see how much new information a real system has compared to the simplest model you can build. Okay, I know that sounds super technical, but the idea behind it is actually beautiful and pretty simple. Think of it this way. Connected information measures the new stuff, the extra information you discover when you look at a triplet that you literally could not have guessed just by looking at all the pairs. It's the surprise factor that only shows up when the whole group is together. So, how does this thing actually work? Well, it's a really clever step-by-step process. First, you look at all the individuals. Then, you look at all the pairs. Next, and this is the key part, you build a computer model, the most random, basic model you can, that only matches the pairwise behavior you just measured. The info you need to do that is your second-order connected information. Then, for the final step, you compare that simple pairwise model to what's happening in the real world. Whatever's left over, that extra bit of information that the pairs couldn't explain, that, my friends, has to be the true third-order synergy.
Okay, so we've got this powerful new tool. Let's take it for a spin, right?
Let's go back to those confusing logic gate examples that gave the old method such a headache, because this is where the new approach really shines.
And just look at this. The results now make perfect intuitive sense. For the AND and OR gates, you see that triplet info IC3? It's 0, exactly 0. The tool correctly sees that everything happening in those systems can be explained just by looking at the pairs. But then, look at the XOR gate. It finds 0 pairwise information and 1 full bit of information at the triplet level. It's cleaned, it's perfect.
So what this means is that the tool correctly identifies the AND and OR gates as being built completely from simple two-way relationships. That model we built using only pairs, it explains the whole system perfectly. There's no secret three-way magic going on, which is exactly what we thought.
Which of course brings us to the most dramatic reveal of all, the XOR gate. Now remember, the weird thing about XOR is that if you look at any two of its parts, they look totally random. There's no connection. And that's what stumped the old method. That's why it gave us that weird -1 number.
But this new tool, connected information, it just cuts right through all that confusion. It nails it. It finds that there's 0 pairwise information, just like we observed, but there is precisely 1 bit of pure, irreducible three-body information. It perfectly captures that hidden structure that you can only see when you look at all 3 parts at once. It is basically the perfect measurement of true synergy.
And get this, it also shows just how sophisticated this method is. The paper shows what happens when you add a little bit of random noise to that perfect XOR system. And the tool doesn't just break. No, it quantifies the change perfectly. The triplet information goes down a bit, and something really interesting happens. A little bit of apparent pairwise information pops up. It's like the noise creates this faint echo of the three-way interaction at a lower level.
So, okay, this is all very neat for these little logic puzzles, but why does any of this actually matter? Well, because it gives us a truly rigorous way to analyze incredibly complex networks. And you know, there aren't many networks out there more complex than the human brain.
With a tool like this, we can start asking some incredibly deep questions about how our brains work. Like, when you see the color red, is that information stored in a few pairs of neurons firing together? Or does the idea of red only exist because of the coordinated, synergistic firing of a whole group? 10, maybe 100 neurons all at once. This tool finally lets us tell the difference between simple correlations and these higher-order multi-neuron words that could be the true language of the brain.
And of course, this isn't just about neurons. This framework gives us a brand new lens to find these hidden, higher-order structures anywhere. Think about it. Is a stock market crash just a bunch of one-on-one panics cascading? Or is there a collective herd behavior that you can't break down into smaller pieces? Does a key species in an ecosystem have a three-way interaction that stabilizes the whole food web? These are the kinds of questions we can now start to answer. We finally have a tool that's sharp enough to find the hidden magic.